Good morning. This is still November 3rd. Just wrapped up the last episode talking about Stephen King's Green Mile in a serialized format. Um, this brings me directly to the new one that I'm going to talk about, which is John Saul and the Blackstone Chronicles. Now, I actually found this in a used bookstore I go to pretty often. Actually, when I lived near there, I used to go there pretty often. Bring your old books in, get some credit, use it to buy some other books that you've either heard of or never seen before. It's great. I found some fantastic books at the used bookstore that I never would have thought to go for before that. So, this is one of them. So, the reason why I even picked it up is because a couple years prior to this, Stephen King did the exact same thing. And he said he talks to him. John Saul did. He talked to him. He thanked him for actually breaking ground with this. But Stephen King actually had his Green Mile book that actually was published in 6 smaller editions that came out periodically over the course of a couple years. And it met with some success. And obviously, whenever someone meets with success doing something new, or in this case, bringing back something old, because way back in the day, people like Edgar Rice Burroughs used to sell their books as serialized editions inside newspapers or inside magazines. In fact, I just dropped an audiobook recently for John Carter, his for Edgar Rice books for try this one more time for Edgar Rice Burroughs, one of his John Carter books called The Mastermind of Mars. This actually came in a magazine's annual. It was Amazing Stories magazine that did one annual edition, and it came out completely in there for like 50 pages. And I think it did well enough, but the magazine then ended up closing shortly afterwards, so it wasn't enough to save the magazine. But he had a whole bunch that came out like that too, where it would be magazines that had stories in it, and then he would publish his story over the course of like 4 or 5 or 6 issues. And there would be some background stories as well, and you might buy the one magazine for Edgar Rice Burroughs, but then get exposed to a few others as well. I recently got a copy of the Amazing Stories Annual for the purpose of actually doing the Mastermind of Mars John Carter book, which is now on audio. I just dropped it this week or last week. And there's probably 6 other stories in there. I've already recorded one of them. I think it was the something about Mr. Fosdick's Imaginatorium. I forget off the top of my head what the name of the book is. I'm sorry. But there's also, like I said, another 5. I'm going to do all of them. So they'll all be in this Amazing Stories annual, 1 by 1 short stories. I'm done digressing. So there was a popularity with Stephen King, and then John Saul was able to do the exact same thing. So it was one of those things. I went into the used bookstore and I saw, wait a minute, these books were on the shelf. Oh, they must be these books. But they weren't. And I was like, John Saul, I've heard the name before. I think I did have a collection of 3 of his novels already in a hardcover. Why don't we give this a shot? I liked the format of the Green Mile. Let's give the Blackstone Chronicles a shot. So I'm pretty much going into it cold because one book looked like another. Which is either, well, for me it's fine because I did learn something good. I've read this at least twice. Other people be like, you're judging a book by the cover. You're not supposed to do that. Well, sue me. So, what is the Blackstone Chronicles? Blackstone is actually a town in New England. And again, small town, almost like one of those Stephen King novels would have a small town in Maine. This is a small town in New England. And the main thing about the town is it grew up around an asylum. And the asylum was in use like turn of the century, 1900s. And that asylum employed the town. Or the town grew up around the asylum. The doctors that were in the asylum were somewhat barbarous, and as you read more and more in the story, you start seeing some case files, you start seeing some history of the patients, and it was just electroshock therapy, water submersion, ice cold water submersion, exposure to the elements. It just seemed more torture than it did therapy. with the caveat that back then they didn't know what to do. So that actually was the treatment of the times. Obviously barbaric, but what they knew then was cutting edge of some kind, I guess. So the asylum was around, the asylum went under. And this happened because I think the man who owned the asylum and who was the head doctor had died and there was no one to take his place, so they pretty much just let it fall into ruin. The hero of the story, though, is part of that family, and he actually lives in like the servants' quarters on the property. So he sees this asylum every day. In fact, I think everyone does, because the way the town is situated, there's like a huge hill, and it's on the top. So you can see the asylum from wherever you are in this town. It looms. But this whole thing starts out because they're going to convert this asylum into almost like a shopping center. The way the bricks are gives you this old looking feel, but they were actually modeled and sequestered enough that you could have individual shops and individual rooms, and it would work well for the proprietors of the store. So that's where this whole thing starts, saying, hey, we're going to kind of tear a little bit of this down, we're going to remodel it, this town's going to go booming again, and we're not just going to be this small town in New England, and go from there. Well, immediately things start going south. For instance, the bank that gives out the loans that's going to help the construction, and the main protagonist of the book, his name's Oliver Metcalf, needs this. He's a construction person. It's his project. They're now under audit because the bank manager knows the people, and he would give out loans to everyone who needs one. Not worrying about when he gets it back. He'll know we'll get it back eventually. Well, he's a small town proprietary bank. SEC doesn't like that. Just willy-nilly giving out money and not concerning about it getting back. So this puts the whole project on halt, and then everyone who's sunk money into getting this new center online is now going to wait like 6 months, and they might not be able to afford to wait 6 months. So the town's already in upheaval because their financial future has now gone kaput, and it put more people in dire straits than were before the plan was on the books. So that's where it starts out basically. How the book, the thriller, comes involved is there is a mysterious person who's going into the dark asylum at night, finds a secret room, and he has a whole bunch of trinkets and objects in this room that were taken from the inmates over the years. And what this mysterious person is doing is they're taking the trinket and leaving it as an anonymous gift on someone's porch or in their car or somewhere that the person that they want to receive it is going to come across it. And when they do, it's as if the item is cursed. And now it ensues the thriller part of this. So I'll go through this really quickly on these 6 books, and we'll see what we got here. It starts out very basic. The doll. So the doll was taken from an inmate that was originally put in there as a child and would not let go of this thing. It was, the doll's name is Samantha, and we have to, don't separate me from Samantha. And the father got fed up with that. In the asylum, the child goes, and the doll's taken away. Well, now this doll finds its way to a family, and it's a mother, father, daughter. And when the doll arrives, it's not sent to anyone. So somehow the daughter and the mother both love this lace-dressed, ivory-faced, blue-eyed blonde doll. So what's going to happen when 2 women in the same family like the same thing, and one's the mother, one's the daughter? And they're both obsessing about it. And the mother will take it away from the daughter, saying, oh, we're going to give this, because she's pregnant, we're going to give it to the new baby, if the baby's a girl. That's who the doll's probably for. But in the meantime, the mother takes the doll and is like stroking it and talking to it and trying to feed it and whatever else. So it's really affecting this family harshly, which does end up with a death in the family by the end of this part of the book. While that's going on, you just get more history of the town, of what's going on with the people. It defines the gossips, it defines the religious people, it defines the town, and then you have a good starting plate to come off of. Number 2, the locket. The locket was a gift back then, between an affair between a doctor and a nurse. But of course, the doctor was married to one of the townsfolk, and there's an extreme jealousy that occurs when one of the inmates actually had the locket, and the doctor took the locket from the inmate to give it to the nurse, which then imbued the locket with some kind of jealousy. So when the mysterious person puts the locket in a gift box for the one husband to give to the wife in town today, he becomes just insanely jealous. Like, he is completely sure that his wife is having an affair. And he's actually the bank manager. He says, oh, wait, you know something? Maybe she caused the audit, and she's the reason I'm having all these problems. God, I hate her. And then the locket just takes over. And then we have that story. Dragon's Flame. The Dragon's Flame is actually a lighter in the shape of a dragon, ruby eyes, and a secret little button, spits out fire from the mouth. This was interesting because it showed how crafty the dark being was, so to speak, because he takes this thing out and actually puts it on a table on a flea market. And the person he wants to have it happens to be walking through the flea market, finds it, and buys it. And even the seller is like, I don't remember that item, but I have so many items coming in and out. I might have this. So what do you think? You know, $8? Fine, I'll take $8. In fact, it's probably only worth $4. Give me $4 and I'm good. So someone just innocently picks up this lighter to give to her sister coming back into town. And you learn more that the lighter was taken from an inmate in the asylum who used to use it to burn themselves and whatnot. And as the lighter goes to the new victim, she starts to burn herself, and it's a long story behind who the sister is coming back. The family that she lives under is actually very religious, or at least the mother is extremely religious. And then it's just say Satan is invoked and this, that, and the other. So the lighter causes more problems and more death. Incidentally, there was death in the locket too. So now you have 3 items, 3 deaths, and people are starting to whisper about this in town. Word's getting out that there is a malefactor who's dropping off trinkets. So if you get something, stay away from it. That brings us to the 4th part. The handkerchief, which is actually a lace handkerchief embroidered with an R, a double R on it in the corner, which was actually done by an inmate in the asylum who was having fantasies of living in some Victorian age, not knowing that she was literally in an asylum. So the handkerchief is ripped from her hands, and she's obviously distraught. It goes into the treasure trove, and it comes out again. And a guy actually finds this in his attic. So this person knew enough to lay it in a place that seemed innocuous to not look like a gift from the malefactor. And this guy brings it up and says, I'm going to give it to my girlfriend, whose name also begins with an R, like the embroidery on the handkerchief, and it goes from there. And of course, goes into her hands, someone is jealous, comes and gets it, yada yada, story goes. Wow, more death. But because this seemed to have come from someone's house and not just some other gift, doesn't really seem in the gossip realm to fit with the other trinkets that occurred before. Moving towards the ending, we have the stereoscope. This is one of those old-fashioned, almost viewers you put to your eyes, and there'd be a picture on the end, and the picture might have 2 pictures side by side, and when you looked at it through the viewer, it would come into a 3D focus. And this someone actually finds in a drawer of an oak chest that was left behind in the asylum, and they bought it from the proprietor of the asylum when they were trying to get rid of things, and this was in the drawer, but it was actually placed in the drawer. And the guy realizes that the pictures that he has that come with the stereoscope are actually of his own house. So from there, you can kind of take your imagination a little bit further, saying what's with the pictures and the house and what happens, and there is some tragedy in this book as well. But again, for a serialized format, this works out extremely well. And then towards the end, this one's just called The Asylum, but the straight razor you see here on the front cover is a very important part of, it's the trinket itself. And this becomes the means by which they wrap everything together. What do all of these trinkets mean in themselves? And it starts to really say, oh, wait a minute, there is a common theme of the trinkets themselves. There's a common theme in the asylum. There's a theme of why this is all happening to everyone and who is to blame. So John Saul was able to write this novel in its 6 parts that would fit perfectly with the serialized format. So I applaud his work. This is fantastic. I'm glad I just stumbled upon this. This could have been my own trinket that someone left on the shelves of a used bookstore for me to find and then become corrupted. And I haven't killed anybody yet, but, you never know. Obviously, I'm kidding. There you go. John Saul, The Blackstone Chronicles, just like Stephen King's The Green Mile, they came out about $3 a piece. And of course, March 6th, got to dig in for the extra $1. That's 4. Gives you $19 for the whole thing. And actually, width and thickness-wise, again, just shy about 500 pages. Or maybe it is 500 pages. So that's a pretty hefty novel in itself. But when you break it down into these small parts, you can knock right through it. You really can. I had done a similar thing when I originally read Ayn Rand and her book Atlas Shrugged. That's 1,000 pages or something like that too. But I looked at it and I was like, you know something? It's 3 books, 10 chapters a piece, 30 chapters in total. You know something? If I make it a point, and so that averages about 60 pages a chapter, give or take. If I do 1 chapter with every read and don't stop until I'm done, I'll have the monster done, in no time. And I had done that. Just like these. If you sit down to go read a 500-page novel, it might take you a long time. But if you read it in 6 80-page increments, that's not bad. Plus, you're seeing the progress you're making. You're like, 10 pages left. Let me just finish it now, and I'll start the next one. So, there you go. Hope this was enjoyable. I hope this is one of those books that you might not have heard of before and now have an interest in and go out and read for yourself. So, enjoy. Again, if you like these, love subscribers, give me some likes, let me know that I'm actually reaching people that want to hear this, and I'll definitely, speed up and do as many as I possibly can. All right, thank you. Take care now.